Hi, my name is Judith Gilliam. I've been a mediator for several years. I'm going to be talking about some positive experiences that I've had with mediating. I've mediated several cases. And I know that I am not in the position to determine who is right or wrong in these cases. Many people do not have the right idea when it comes to mediating cases. So mediating is simply to help when there is a conflict. Perhaps there's a bad conflict that is taking place, or a situation or experience that's important to resolve. We want to make sure that both parties are satisfied. If the situation is extremely serious and cannot be resolved, then we will have to go to someone of higher authority to help resolve that situation. I also want to add that mediating is very important for both the interpreter and the deaf consumer. Also, it is perceived that mediating is a threat to the communication process, but instead it shouldn't be seen as a threat but an opportunity. Because when the conflict does occur, it's a good opportunity for the interpreter to look at the situation and analyze what they thought might not be important, or maybe a small issue, and to see that it did impact the deaf community. Interpreters do have skills, but oftentimes the interpretation just continues. Sometimes the deaf person will not experience something right, or maybe show some behavior that's unprofessional or not of the norm. So if a situation happens and mediation is needed, and later the deaf person sees the interpreter again and decides, you know what, that was good and I want to work with that interpreter again, because they know that in the past the conflict was resolved, that's very important. Same is true for the deaf individual who saw the interpreter as wrong during the mediation process. They may not be sure if they ever want to work with that person. And any kind of experience for the deaf or the interpreter can be very awkward or intimidating. I don't want you to see it as a threat, but instead as an opportunity. Sometimes in mediation we will have a team. For example, the situation may be that a hearing person and another hearing person have filed a complaint against one another. So there will be a hearing mediator present, and a deaf mediator will sometimes be present as well. But in this case, the hearing interpreter or mediator will be doing the mediating. But in another example, perhaps there's a deaf person filing a complaint against a hearing interpreter. There will be a hearing mediator and a deaf mediator present, most likely. And this is really good for many reasons. The hearing mediator will be able to look at and understand the hearing interpreter. But when you have the deaf mediator present, it really helps the process, because they can see the hearing interpreter's perspective. And they can see that the hearing mediator isn't supporting only the hearing interpreter. But they can also be there for the deaf person to see their perspective and also to give them some relief knowing there's another deaf person present to support them. It really helps to know that there's another deaf person present to make sure the communication is flowing, that there's no misunderstandings, and also just cultural aspects are being taken care of as well. The deaf mediator is not there to just support the deaf person. They're here for both parties, both hearing and deaf. They're not here to see who's right or wrong. They're here to resolve conflict and to see how the conflict even occurred. It's just a really good opportunity. I love being a mediator. I've had many experiences, some very good, and several of them really just hit home with me and were hard to get through, but I did. And one day, I was with a group of people, and someone walked up to me with tears in her eyes, and she was crying. And she said, "Do you remember me?" And I was like, "No, I'm sorry. I really just couldn't remember." She said that there was a situation that happened in the past. Anyways, she's sitting there crying, and I asked for her name, and she was like, "Do you remember you mediated something for me?" And I did remember, which was really awkward because I never want to talk about my job outside of work. She told me that she was really ready to quit being an interpreter. But when I started mediating, she decided just to keep on interpreting. And it really just hit home with me. It showed me that I made a difference in that interpreter. So that's really important to me.